Today I want to talk about independent contractors and how they are different from employees, and why that matters, and how you can protect yourself. Hi, I'm Tiffany, and welcome to Legal Guides for Creatives. I am a business and intellectual property attorney, and I am here to help creatives to launch and grow their businesses in a smart way. But first, a necessary evil, a quick legal disclaimer. I'm an attorney, but I am not your attorney. The things I talk about in this video should not be construed as legal advice, and I always recommend consulting with an attorney that is licensed in your particular state. Just 20 years ago, freelancing wasn't really that big of a thing, but as the gig economy ramped up over the last few years, it's become more and more of an issue. Specifically, whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee of a company. While there are some really great benefits to hiring an independent contractor, there are some big risks if you don't know what the difference is between an independent contractor and an employee. So why do we care if someone's an independent contractor or an employee? Well, if you get it wrong, misclassify someone, and you get audited, which is not that uncommon really, you'll have some majorly annoying and really expensive consequences to deal with. And we'll talk a little later in this video about what those consequences are. So if you are hiring someone as an independent contractor, it is critical that you are engaging them in the proper way. So let's dive in. There are plenty of benefits for hiring an independent contractor because, well, they're cheaper. It's going to save you a lot of money as an employer. You don't have to pay for all the associated expenses of an employee, such as taxes, training, promotions, overtime, benefits, workers' compensation insurance, 401k matches, and more. It's also easier to plug any gaps in your workforce by bringing in an independent contractor who is specialized in something you need and can just hit the ground running. The problem is, the longer you work with an independent contractor, the more your relationship can start to change, and you might end up starting to treat them as an employee without realizing that you're doing that. And that is a big no-no. So let's start here. What is the difference between an independent contractor and an employee? So this is the definition that the IRS gives for independent contractors. People such as doctors, dentists, veterinarians, lawyers, accountants, contractors, subcontractors, public stenographers, or auctioneers who are in an independent trade, business, or profession in which they offer their services to the general public are generally considered independent contractors. So, like most things in law, the determination really depends on the facts of that particular case. But according to the IRS, the general rule is an individual is an independent contractor if the payer has the right to control or direct only the result of the work and not what will be done and how it will be done. So if you're in an employer-employee relationship, no matter what you call it, if you perform services that can be directly controlled by your employer, like how you're going to do them, you are not an independent contractor. So let's say you're a graphic designer and a company brings you on to design a logo for them. So let's say you're working on logo designs, you're working from your own home, you're setting your own hours, you are still accepting work from other clients, then we can probably safely assume you are an independent contractor. Now, let's contrast that with the same situation. You're hired by a company to design a logo, but let's say once you sign that contract that says you're an independent contractor, you are immediately given an employee email that does not designate that you are a contractor, not an employee. You are told you have to work from the hours of 9 to 5, you're not taking on any other work for other clients. That's starting to push into the employee category, especially if you start having to be required to go to meetings and participate in company events. That's making you less and less like an independent contractor and more like an employee. Since you don't have that freedom to do the work you do on your own terms and you're kind of being incorporated into the company culture, it seems like maybe you shouldn't have been classified as an independent contractor at all, or you have become an employee over time. There are other factors that do differentiate an independent contractor from an employee. If you are an independent contractor, that means you are self-employed. This means your earnings as an independent contractor are subject to self-employment taxes. If you are an employee, that means you are not subject to self-employment taxes because you are not self-employed. But you may be subject to FICA, which is your Social Security and Medicare withholdings, and also your income tax withholdings. So what does this look like? How does this go down? The Department of Labor regularly audits companies to make sure that everyone is classified properly. And they're not doing this just to be difficult and make everyone's lives miserable. Their interests actually lie in protecting the workers to make sure that they are not becoming victims of some sort of employment abuse. A worker is entitled to minimum wage and overtime pay protections under the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act, when they're acting as an employee. So they want to make sure that workers that are acting as employees are actually getting the protections under these laws that protect employees, instead of having someone working as an employee and not getting that protection while the employer saves money. Another way you could end up getting audited is if you do have someone that you've classified as an independent contractor and they put in a complaint saying that they should actually be classified as an employee of that company. If you do get audited and there is someone found that should be classified as an employee instead of an independent contractor, there are a lot of consequences that go along with that. Remember, if the worker is classified as an employee, you must withhold and remit certain taxes on their behalf. None of this applies to independent contractors. So if you've been misclassifying someone as an independent contractor, here are some of the consequences you could face: back pay, overtime pay, criminal penalties, civil liabilities, attorney's fees, and more. Employers are the ones who are responsible for figuring out if someone is working for them as an independent contractor. So if you run a business that hires independent contractors or wants to hire independent contractors, you want to take some precautions to make sure that you are not misclassifying anyone as an independent contractor instead of an employee. There are different tests that regulators can use to determine if someone is truly an independent contractor, and I'm not going to go into depth on those actual tests that are used, but I do want to name them so you can look into it for yourself if you choose to. The Department of Labor and Social Security Administration uses an economic reality test. Many states use a 3-factor ABC test, but this can vary, sometimes really substantially from state to state, so you definitely want to check and see what your state says about what tests they use. The IRS uses an 11-factor test, which is mostly based on that definition that I gave earlier on in this video. While it's important for employers to know what these tests are, I highly recommend you talk to an attorney that is licensed in your state so they can give you the specifics for your state. Now, if you are trying to just do a quick analysis and see if you're kind of headed in the right direction and things are looking like they're classified correctly, I want to give you some core factors that you can look to. Ask yourself where, when, and how is the work performed? Is the contractor working remotely, or are they physically on the premises? Do they have set hours or flexibility to work when they want? Is the employer providing the tools needed to do the job, or is the contractor? The second question is, does the employer train the contractor on how to do the work? Is the work temporary or is it ongoing? Does the project have a specific endpoint? Has the contractor been working for the company for more than 1 year? Does the contractor have the autonomy to do the work in the manner they see fit, or does the employer direct their actions beyond basic instructions? Is the contractor free to accept work from other businesses? Is the employer deducting taxes from payments to the contractor? Is the contractor treated like an employee? That last factor is probably the place where most employers slip up. If you start blurring the lines and start treating your worker as more of an employee, that's when you're kind of starting to transform that contract into something else. And then you run the risk of them being considered misclassified if you are audited. So pay really close attention to how you are treating that person. They have to have their autonomy to do their work, and you are not exerting excess control over how and when and why they're doing it. Now, I want to mention one last thing before we call it. If you are signing a contract that says you are an independent contractor, I want you to keep an eye out for any language that appears to be shifting the burden of the misclassification onto you instead of the employer. This is a bad situation because, like we talked about earlier, if you are audited and found to have been misclassified, you don't want to be liable for all those really expensive costs that go along with that. So make sure that you are signing a contract that doesn't try to put that burden onto you. So that's it for today. Thanks so much for being here. If you found any of this helpful, please subscribe. I will be uploading a lot more videos about how to launch and build a creative business in a smart way. So if that sounds like something you're into, please subscribe. If you have any suggestions for video topics that you would like to see addressed in future videos, please put them down in the comments and I will try to get to all of those. So that's it for today, and I'll see you soon.